Hi students! Tonight we are going to start discussing the molecules that are important in enabling our cells to function. We will focus tonight on inorganic molecules, and in particular water. But before we get there, I wanted to remind you of something that I hope you've learned about before, which is the hierarchy of matter. It is summarized nicely in the diagram that you see here. In Chapter 2, we are going to focus on the part of the hierarchy boxed here in green. First, recall from last year that all matter is made up of atoms, and that atoms may join together to make a molecule. What we will learn in this chapter is that many molecules can join together to make really, really big molecules called macromolecules, right here. And that these macromolecules can be put together to build all of the little parts of the cells. These cell parts are called organelles. And you need many types of organelles to make one complete cell. So, I would like for you to be able to use all these vocabulary terms, atom, molecule, macromolecule, organelle, and cell, in their correct order to describe how matter is organized in living things. In the next chapter, we'll look at how cells are further organized into structures that will eventually make up an organism, shown in this box, this red box. But that will be in Chapter 3. All right, let's begin at the bottom of the hierarchy with atoms and molecules. So last year, we learned that when two atoms join together to form a new substance, a chemical bond is formed between them. And this bond keeps the atoms stuck together. Now, what we didn't tell you last year, but you may have wondered, is what exactly makes the bond form between atoms? Well, the chemical bonds between atoms are formed through the interaction of the atom's outermost electrons. And of course, once those bonds form between two or more of these atoms, the group of stuck-together atoms is now called a molecule. So, for example, if we look at the water molecule in the diagram below, you will see the oxygen atom in red and two hydrogen atoms in yellow. The other thing that I hope that you will notice are these black dots that represent the atom's electrons. And what happens is that these electrons will move back and forth in the areas here between the two atoms. And that movement of the electrons back and forth keeps these atoms attracted to each other. You can see the same thing here between these two chlorine atoms. What's keeping them together is the electrons, and between this hydrogen and chlorine atom as well. So, you can actually stick together all kinds of atoms to make the molecules that are important to life on Earth. So here are some examples. Oxygen, which is two oxygen atoms stuck together. Nitrogen gas, two nitrogen atoms stuck together. Water, H2O. NH3, which is ammonia. NaCl, salt. And C6H12O6, which is a sugar compound that we'll talk a lot about this year. So, we will start to discuss the importance of molecules in biology, these molecules and others. And we're going to start right now. Erase these drawings. Okay. The first category of molecules that we are going to look at are the inorganic molecules. Inorganic molecules are molecules that are made from elements other than carbon and hydrogen. So, for example, water, H2O, salt, NaCl, and hydrochloric acid, HCl, are all examples of inorganic molecules because none of them contain both hydrogen and carbon atoms together in their chemical formulas. Now, they may contain one of these two types of atoms, such as the water, which has hydrogen atoms in it, or something like carbon dioxide, which has carbon atoms. But nothing that is inorganic contains both hydrogen and carbon together. So, this year we're actually going to spend most of our time focusing on the other category, which is organic molecules, because it's due to the ability of organic molecules to form into macromolecules that life exists on Earth. However, inorganic molecules are still essential to healthy living organisms. So, inorganic molecules are found in the soil and also in the food you eat. Some of the roles of inorganic molecules in the bodies of living organisms are to provide a solvent for chemical reactions to occur. Okay, so the word solvent is a fancy word for a substance that dissolves other substances. And in the case of living things, water, H2O, is our inorganic molecule that acts like a solvent. Next, inorganic molecules like the hydroxyapatite, which is the carbon phosphate molecule you see here. Some inorganic molecules give strength to bones. Some inorganic molecules help digest food, like the hydrochloric acid you see here. Inorganic molecules are vital to help passing messages along nerve cells. And actually, there are many, many, many other roles of inorganic molecules in the body, too numerous to list here. For the rest of today's lecture, we are actually going to focus on one type of inorganic molecule, one that is vitally important to life, and that is H2O, or water. So, why is water so important in biology that it gets its own 2 slides? There are many reasons, but I'm going to give you 3 here. 1, scientists think that life on Earth began in its oceans. It's hypothesized that the first cells came together to form complex molecules floating in early Earth's ancient oceans, not too different from this one here. Without water to be a dissolving substance for these ancient molecules to float around and interact in, it's unlikely that the first cell would ever have developed, and then life as we know it would not exist. 2, living things like this tree and this person depend on water to survive because we're actually made of more than 50% water. Without frequent access to water, cells can become dehydrated, lose their ability to function, and die, causing the death of the entire organism. And finally, 3, all chemical reactions in living things take place in water solutions. It is what we call the universal solvent. Again, this word solvent means a substance that dissolves other substances. You may want to note that on your slide. It's important that water can dissolve other things because atoms and molecules must be dissolved inside of cells like these cells here. All those molecules must be dissolved if they're going to be able to interact and bond and power the chemical reactions that make life happen. Okay, to finish today, we are going to discuss 3 characteristics or properties that make the water molecule unique compared to most other molecules. The first property that makes water unique is the fact that it is polar. When you think about the word polar, I hope it brings to mind the image of Earth's opposite ends, called poles. To be polar means to have opposite ends, and in the case of the water molecule, the ends are opposite in their charge. If you look at the diagram, you can see, here's our water molecule from before, you can see that the oxygen end has a negative charge, and the hydrogen ends have positive charges. So the ends are oppositely charges. And what happens when you have oppositely charged ends is that if you bring together the first molecule with a second water molecule here, here's our second water molecule, the opposite ends of the two molecules will attract. And that's what you see inside this blue box, is that one water molecule's negative end is attracting to a second water molecule's positive end. This stickiness between water molecules results in something called surface tension, which is why this water bug does not fall through the water here, and also why it hurts when you belly flop into a pool. We will also see in a lab over the next few days that water molecules can dissolve other substances very easily, and the reason is because water molecules, as polar molecules, make them a good solvent. And polarity makes it a good solvent. Okay. The second thing I want you to know that makes water unique is that water can absorb a lot of heat without changing temperature very much. For example, think of how long it takes to boil water and compare that for how long it takes for something like metal to heat up. Water can absorb way more energy before it starts to get hot. This is important because in our own bodies, water acts as an insulator and helps us maintain a constant temperature, preventing us from getting too hot too quickly. It also allows life-sustaining chemical reactions to take place because chemical reactions can only happen at normal medium temperatures, not temperatures that are too hot or too cold. Finally, the last unique property of water is that liquid water is actually more dense than solid water. If you've never stopped to think about this, you've probably never realized how odd it is. But the truth is that almost every other substance out there is more dense in its solid form than in its liquid form, because molecules usually pack together more densely when they're solid. Water is the exception. Ice is actually less dense than liquid water, which is why ice floats. This is also why Earth has been able to make it through very cold periods of history without whole lakes, like this one, or even oceans completely freezing over into ice blocks. Because once the water starts freezing, the solid part stays on top and insulates the liquid part underneath. Okay, that's all for tonight. Don't forget to take your Quizmodo, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.